The international lounge carried an air of quiet elegance, the soft hum of jazz music, the scent of expensive perfume, and the gleam of polished marble floors. Everyone was in their own world, immersed in phones or laptops. But that stillness cracked the moment she walked in. A tall, sharply dressed Japanese businesswoman entered, exuding authority with every step. Her black Chanel suit was crisp, and her Louis Vuitton handbag hung perfectly at her side. Her heels clicked with precision, and her cold, calculating gaze scanned the room like she owned it. She walked directly toward the first-class check-in line without hesitation. A moment later, another woman quietly approached, an American woman named Julia. Her outfit was simple: jeans, a navy blue sweater, and an economy-style laminated boarding pass clutched tightly in her hand. No designer brands, no flashy jewelry. Just calm eyes and a humble presence. The check-in attendant glanced up and nodded toward Julia. "Next, please." Julia stepped forward gently, her voice soft but steady. "Excuse me, I think I'm next." The Japanese woman turned sharply. Her eyes narrowed, her tone icy. "Get out. You don't belong here." Gasps rippled silently through the lounge. A businessman lowered his phone. A European couple exchanged shocked glances. Even the receptionist froze for a second. Julia stood still. Her face didn't flinch. For a brief moment, pain flickered in her eyes, not embarrassment, but something deeper. She slowly stepped back and lowered her gaze. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I can wait." But her eyes, they told a different story. There was no fear, no submission, just a calm depth, the kind only seen in those who have seen more than they say. The Japanese woman gave a dismissive, mocking chuckle. Typical. Always backing off. Julia looked at her, just for a second. Their eyes locked. No anger. No comeback. Just silence, and something unsettling in Julia's calm expression. She turned her head, and the moment passed. But everyone in that lounge felt the change. Something had shifted. No one knew who Julia really was. But they were about to find out. A few moments passed in uncomfortable silence. The lounge, once filled with the quiet hum of routine travel, now held tension thick enough to cut with a knife. People avoided eye contact, unsure whether to speak up or stay silent. But someone had noticed everything. A tall man in a black tailored suit, standing near the corner with a discreet earpiece in his ear. His eyes were sharp, calculating. He wasn't just a bystander. He walked over to Julia, calm but purposeful. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked in a low, respectful voice. Julia looked up, her expression soft but unreadable. She offered a small smile. "Yes. Just not the first time I've been told that." The man gave a slight nod, as if he understood more than he let on. Just then, the Japanese woman rolled her eyes and scoffed loudly. "You Americans think you can buy your way into everything, even respect. That's why the world laughs at you." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Everyone heard it. But Julia didn't flinch. She turned slightly toward the woman and, with a calm voice that cut sharper than any yell, said, "Respect isn't something you buy. It's something you earn. And sometimes, it's something that gets tested." Before the woman could reply, the airport speaker system crackled to life. "Attention! Miss Julia Lawrence, you are requested at the executive terminal. Your private security escort is now ready to accompany you to your aircraft." The room froze. Again. All eyes turned to Julia. Private security. Executive terminal. Who was she? The suited man next to her spoke into his earpiece. "She's ready." Julia adjusted the strap on her modest carry-on bag and turned to leave. She walked with a quiet confidence, not the fake kind that screams power, but the kind that is power. The Japanese woman's face had lost all its smugness. Confusion, even fear, flashed in her eyes. Her assistant leaned in close, whispering something urgently in Japanese. The woman's expression changed, from superiority to pale realization. Julia stopped just before exiting the lounge. She looked over her shoulder, her voice even and unshaken. "For someone who talks about respect, you sure don't know what it looks like." And with that, she walked away, leaving behind a room full of silence, a stunned crowd, and a woman who now wished she had kept her mouth shut. As Julia stepped into the black vehicle waiting outside the executive terminal, the world behind those glass airport doors seemed far away. Her calm exterior remained unshaken, but inside her mind, calculations were constantly running, not of revenge, but of precision, diplomacy, and responsibility. She wasn't just any traveler. Julia Lawrence was one of the U.S. government's most trusted international conflict negotiators, a woman who once worked in naval intelligence, fluent in 5 languages, decorated for her role in disarming a rogue nuclear threat off the coast of Southeast Asia, and currently assigned to one of the most sensitive trade missions in modern history. The Japanese Prime Minister's office had requested her personally. A week ago, her confidential briefing had described a fragile alliance teetering between 3 Pacific nations. A multi-billion-dollar trade pact was on the line, a deal that would affect global markets, energy pipelines, and, most importantly, peace in a rising sea of tension. What the arrogant woman back in the lounge didn't know was that her own corporation, Kazuri Global, stood to lose hundreds of millions if the deal went sideways. And the woman she insulted was the one holding the pen that could finalize, or break, their influence. Inside the moving car, Julia opened a sleek metal folder. Her eyes moved over the profile she had memorized already. Madam Keiko Tanaka, CEO of Kazuri Global, highly influential in East Asian trade negotiations, ruthless reputation, and known for manipulating international protocols to gain advantage. The same woman who had told her to get out. Julia closed the file. Across town, in a glass skyscraper overlooking Tokyo Bay, Keiko Tanaka was now pacing in her luxury suite. Her assistant, sweating slightly, said nervously, "Ma'am, if that was Julia Lawrence at the airport, we may have made a grave mistake." Keiko stared at the floor, shaken. "I didn't recognize her. I thought she was just some nobody." "Not her." "You told her to get out," the assistant added, as if trying to process it aloud. Keiko clenched her jaw. "And she didn't even correct me." Silence. "She let me humiliate her," she whispered, and still walked away without a word. The assistant hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Because she didn't need to fight you there. She'll be sitting across from you tomorrow morning. In the negotiation room." That was the moment Keiko realized the truth. She hadn't embarrassed Julia. She had exposed herself. The sun was just beginning to rise over Tokyo as Julia's private jet touched down, slicing through the misty morning air. The tarmac was quiet, but the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Waiting on the runway was a black diplomatic car with government insignias, ready to take her directly to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Julia exited the aircraft, composed and focused. Her eyes didn't reflect anger, just clarity. She wasn't here to settle a personal score. She was here to protect balance, to finalize a trade agreement that could prevent a potential economic ripple across the Pacific. And ironically, one of the corporate players who stood to benefit the most was the very woman who tried to degrade her the day before. Inside the ministry's grand negotiation hall, walls lined with cherry-wood panels and gold-framed historical calligraphy, the most powerful players in Pacific trade were taking their seats. Julia walked in calmly, briefcase in hand, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. On the opposite side of the long polished table sat Keiko Tanaka, the same woman who had said, "Get out." Keiko looked up, and for the first time in years, her confidence cracked. She stood, slightly unsure whether to greet Julia or avoid her. The room, filled with ministers, diplomats, and executives, grew silent. Julia placed her briefcase on the table, took out her documents, and finally looked up. Their eyes met. For a few seconds, no words were exchanged. Then Keiko, clearing her throat, softly said, "Miss Lawrence, I believe I owe you an apology." Julia didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "You owe your country and your reputation the truth," she said firmly. "Let's focus on fixing that, not just this deal." A pause. Then she added, "Because power isn't measured by who you humiliate in public, but by how you act when the whole world is watching." The room remained frozen for a beat. Even the interpreters hesitated before continuing. The power dynamic had shifted completely, not through dominance, but through quiet authority. Hours later, the deal was signed. Julia walked out of the ministry without fanfare, as quietly as she had arrived. But the impact of her presence lingered long after. Reporters would later describe the negotiation as miraculously smooth. What they wouldn't know was that one woman's humility had saved another from international disgrace, and in doing so, had stabilized a billion-dollar future. Julia never looked back. Because for people like her, the real victories aren't in headlines, they're in moments. And sometimes, the loudest message is delivered in complete silence.